Good afternoon, everyone. Looks like it's 3:30, so I'd like to call the subcommittee meeting for infrastructure, transportation, and safety to order. Item 2 is a disclosures of pecuniary interest and the general nature thereof. Do we have any disclosures? Councillor Vasilakos.
Yeah, although I'm not sure if it's technically a pecuniary interest, but I'm going to declare it anyways, just because perception. Item 3.2 and 3.3, my spouse is on the board of Cycle Stratford, and I'm a volunteer organizer on the Perth County Cycling Tour, so I'll not vote on anything to do with those ones. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Seeing none. Item 3, we have delegations, and 3.1 is a delegation by Mr. Larry Baswick. So if we could queue up Mr. Baswick, that would be great. Can I have a motion to hear the delegation from Mr. Baswick? Councillor Gaffney, all in favor? Okay, that's carried. Please go ahead.
Hello.
Hi. Go ahead. We can hear you now.
Okay, there's no screen being used here?
No, not at this time.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. I'd like to thank the committee for allowing this presentation and the clerk's office for arranging it. My name is Larry Baswick. I'm a resident of Stratford. And I handed out a couple of pieces of paper which contain pretty much all the speaking points I have to address. And I'd like to go through it and throw in a couple of extra comments as I do. I shall be within my time limit of 10 minutes. So I live in a subdivision bounded by Mornington, William, Romeo, and McCarthy. These homes are 30, 40, 50 years old. It's a well-established neighborhood. Accordingly, many homes are being remodeled, upgraded, or undergoing extensive landscaping. Some projects are minor, requiring only a few days of attention. Others are protracted, involve several contractors. In these latter cases in particular, the activity has a real impact on neighbors in several ways. I'd like to just say that this started with me over 4 years ago when a neighbor 2 doors down took out an entire garden in the backyard. They had just moved in and did that, and then put in a pool and an outdoor kitchen and so on. And the entire backyard is paved with paving stones, and it took an awful lot to put that in terms of dust and noise and so on. And then 3 years ago, the next door neighbor did an entire renovation, gutted the house, put on an addition, including a basement, new basement, and then went on with an outdoor living area along with a plunge pool. And that is still going on and will go on into next year. So by the time next year comes along, I'll have experienced this for probably close to 5 years. First of all, I'd like to point out the noise attendant to demolition or building, which is unavoidable in some cases, but unnecessary in others. Either way, the beep, beep, beep of reversing machinery, the cutting of wood, stone, and other materials, the music from workers' radios, most of it country, and I'm not a country fan, and communication between workers, both of which compete with machinery and volume, high-powered vehicular engines coming and going to the site, hammers, augers. They're all an intrusion to the peace and quiet one expects in a less than new environment. I mean, you could understand this if you just were buying in a new subdivision. You're going to have to live with this for a year or two. As I said, I've been living with it for more than that. 25% of my life in Stratford, in fact. enjoyment of my backyard has been compromised from spring to fall for those 4+ years, and it isn't over yet. And I'm obviously not alone in this regard, and it is a topic of often colorful conversation in the neighborhood. So that's first of all the noise and the visual distraction of lights going and so on. Which is the point that I'm coming to now. Second, there is the visual distraction, the constant movement of machinery and workers and flashing lights of vehicles and cement trucks and backhoes and trailers and the life parked outside front windows all contribute to a continual diversion of attention to what a neighbor might rather be doing. For instance, watching the news or cooking shows, as I am wont to do. For instance, just as Jamie Oliver might be putting in some substance into a new dish, and just as he's saying what it is, a truck starts backing up, and I miss it. So, I mean, that's minor, but that's what I'm talking about. Huge clouds of dust from stone and brick cutting make breathing difficult and lay heavily on delicate plants and shrubbery. I have to hose them down often just so that they can breathe. Not to mention the cleaning of windows and so on, which I've had to have people in to do, particularly on the outside. I'm getting on in age, and that's not easy for me anymore. Add to this the storage of materials, which is often left on the boulevards and open yards, which detracts from the aesthetic that most homeowners, including myself, try to achieve for their property. This is all part of the above angry, over-the-fence discussions. While the other senses are not assailed to this degree, the psyche is. There is a state of mind that is created from this continuous physical assault, which is debilitating. It is a slow deterioration towards the negative, and a mood which is darker than it should be, given the expectation of quiet, pleasant, visually attractive surroundings. That's why we bought here. Cannot be sloughed off as c'est la vie or as a normal component of living in an urban setting. In many cases, particularly with these protracted undertakings, it is beyond acceptable and needs to be addressed by the city as a serious quality of life issue. I'm making this presentation to request that staff undertake to establish guidelines for levels of intensity and duration of home renovation, vacant lot, and demolition replacement projects, and that designated levels be accompanied by a compensation package built into contracts, through which neighbors are able to mitigate the impacts of such projects. Excuse me. I would further have staff have a quality of life understanding signed by each contractor and home business owner of the project, which stipulates a variety of procedures to follow which will lessen the impact of the project on neighbors. An incomplete list would include the use of radios, as I referred to before, provision of discreetly placed portable toilets. There hasn't been a toilet on either of these projects for 5 years. And I've had anecdotes from a neighbor witnessing workers relieving themselves outside. Use of water when cutting stone. When I asked about that, they said, no, that makes things too messy. Anyway, all of these would bear input from those experienced in the subject much more than I am. As I thought about this, I continued to think about maybe it's more important to have a committee constructed, established, Quality of Life Committee, which would develop a mission statement which demonstrates that the City of Stratford holds the precepts of life quality important and dear. Excuse me again. Its mandate would be to identify those aspects of living here which would generally be viewed as contributing to the comfort and contentment of Stratford citizenry, and developing those qualities which detract from the contentment and comfort, and review current bylaws through a lens which reflects the same. As society is increasingly not acknowledging environmental issues such as climate change, and have to always consider constitutional law when passing legislation. So would this committee pass proposed municipal legislation through a filter of quality of life. We have much to be proud of in Stratford, and a quality of life facet in this gem would ensure we don't become complacent about what we have. It may seem to be a superfluous or impractical or too soft a component, for inclusion in the city's structure and legal and bylaw structure. But I would argue that we as individuals are constantly striving to improve our life circumstance, and this would simply reflect that imperative. So I would then, I would conclude by saying that I would ask the ITS to first ask staff to have contractors aware of the impact they are having on neighbors, and beyond that, perhaps to strike a quality of life committee, which would have all legislation viewed through that particular lens. And when setting up the first one, I would be happy to be involved in those deliberations. So again, thank you very much for your time, and if you have any questions, I'd be pleased to try and answer them.
Thank you, Mr. Baswick. Any questions? Councillor Vasilakos.
So I was just wondering, Mr. Baswick, some of the issues that you flagged would fall under some of our existing bylaws. Have you called our bylaw officer for, I'm thinking some of the noise complaints or the materials left on, like the construction debris, et cetera, being left on boulevards? Have you contacted the city to see whether some of those items could be addressed through bylaw?
No, I tried to address those, Ms. Vasilakos, with the owners of the property themselves and with the contractors. You know, I'd go over and say, could you turn the radio down? Would you mind the language? That sort of thing. And the workers were always very polite, said, sorry, you know, sorry. But then it would happen again. In those particular instances, I did not go to bylaw, but I did go to your one of your offices. I'm sorry, it just slips my mind right now, regarding the state in which a boulevard was left for a long time, not related directly to this, but nonetheless. What I wound up having, the response to me was that the city doesn't actually look after that. You contract it out, and that they are being at the whim of the contractor as to when they are going to address something. So try to get something done might not necessarily be in the bailiwick of the city, or it may very well be something that is contracted out and over which the city has little control. But in terms of actually going to a bylaw officer and saying, could you come down here and listen to this, it didn't seem fruitful to me at the time, given that, you know, the contractor may be gone by the time someone got there, or whatever. I would think it would be better if there was a bylaw officer assigned to go to these sites on an ad hoc basis and just monitor it.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. I was only pointing that out because, as I said in reading your letter, it occurred to me that we do have a number of bylaws, and a lot of them are about quality of life, about neighbors, about noise, about certainly about construction and property standards. And so you could find some relief within that. But I think the other thing, I was just pointing out that sometimes when you take some of these issues and you submit them to the clerks or to staff, it gives them an opportunity to review our existing bylaws and say, oh, well, maybe there's something missing here, or there's something we can improve. So I think, unfortunately, we have a complaint basis on bylaw because of limited resources. But, you know, if you could flag them as they happen, it would be really helpful, as you say, to try to make sure that our bylaws align with, you know, the values of like quality of life for citizens.
Understood. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for Mr. Baswick? Let's see. Oh, Councillor Vasilakos, go ahead.
So, Mr. Baswick, I'm just really, I was a little curious because the committee that you sort of flagged, I haven't seen anything like that. In fact, I'm not exactly sure that it's within our, I mean, the city clerk could maybe weigh in on this, whether it's even within our authority under the municipal act to do some of the things that you're asking. But do you by any chance have an example of this kind of committee and its mandate and what it does? I didn't have a lot of time, unfortunately, but I did try to see if I could find anything, and I really didn't.
Do I have an example of what it is I'm asking for within the present construct?
Yeah, just because usually we always look to best practices, or is there a community that is doing this, or is there someone else that actually has set up this committee? And I'm just wondering if in any of your research you found any. I'm not saying that you needed to, I'm just wondering if you happen to have an example.
Yeah. No, I have to answer in the negative. I haven't. However, I would be more than pleased to be a vanguard in that regard. If you're looking for someone to set up a committee like that, I'm your man.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, are there any other questions or comments? Okay, seeing none. Thank you, Mr. Baswick.
Thank you.
Councillor Seven.
Thank you. I did have a question for Mr. Crinkla just regarding this. I'm just wondering, and I don't want to put him on the spot, I'd certainly, if you wanted to look into it, but I was just curious if how our existing bylaws would compare to something like Mr. Baswick is alluding to, or if something that he's referring to exists in other communities that you're aware of. And certainly, like I said, feel free to come back with that information, but I'm just curious if you know.
Sure, yeah, through the chair. Definitely the idea of quality of life is quite common amongst other municipalities, and the main way that this gets addressed is through the various bylaws that we do have. For example, we have a noise bylaw that restricts certain types of sounds during certain times in certain neighborhoods, right? So there are some provisions in place. The lot maintenance bylaw, as well as property standards, are bylaws that have components that help address this issue. As the specific issues come in, we can modify our bylaws to better address concerns that Mr. Baswick has. But for the most part, construction activities, there's very limited that we can do just during daytime hours.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Crinkla. Are there any other comments or questions? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to 3.2, which is a delegation by Cycle Stakeholder Group. So the Cycle Stakeholder Group is made up of representatives from Destination Stratford, the Downtown Stratford BIA, and Cycle Stratford and the Perth County Cycling Tour. And they've requested to address the subcommittee to provide an update on the Ontario by Bike certification and cycle tourism efforts. So if we could have those representatives on the line. Oh, we need a motion to hear from the representatives. Councillor Gaffney, all those in favor? Okay, thank you. So go ahead, Mr. Griebel or whoever is going to be presenting.
Hi, it's Zach from Destination Stratford.
Hi, welcome. Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you much. So thank you for this opportunity to provide you with a quick update of cycle tourism development work underway in Stratford and in Perth County. So early on in the pandemic, it became quite obvious that self-guided outdoor activities would be in high demand. And this has been made crystal clear with cycling. The demand for bikes skyrocketed and the industry is still dealing with supply shortages. So cycle tourism was already a fast growing segment, but it's really taken off over the last year. Can I have the next slide, please? So Destination Stratford has identified cycle tourism as a priority for destination development projects. And as such, we've collaborated with Perth County and St. Mary's to create a strategic partnership specifically focused on building our cycle infrastructure and leveraging our cultural reputation to become a destination of choice for cyclists. The first action taken by our group was to invest in a 3-year membership with Ontario by Bike, which is the leading authority of cycle tourism within the province. So this membership allows any tourism business or organization within Stratford, St. Mary's, or Perth County to register to become bike-friendly certified and at no cost to the business itself. Ontario by Bike is also a significant marketing opportunity, and our region is now part of their marketing and advertising distribution channels. Next slide, please. Our region is also quite special for cyclists with a large number of scenic county roads, and Stratford is really ideally situated to be a hub and spoke home base to explore the county and beyond by bike. And to my surprise, one of the most in-demand cycle routes is gravel roads. And some would say, thanks to our slow pace and paving the rural roads throughout the region, we have no shortage of gravel roads perfect for cycling trips using hybrid or mountain bikes. So who knew that a lack of paved roads would create such a unique opportunity? Next slide, please. Our friends at Cycle Stratford can attest to the demand and interest for cycle tourists and enthusiasts to come to Stratford. This is an image from this year's Perth County Cycling Tour, which was capped at 150 riders due to COVID restrictions at the time. This event quickly sold out, and I'll let Cycle Stratford speak to what the possibilities were in terms of attendees and what it looks like growing into the future. Next slide, please. So in order to better communicate that Stratford is a cycling destination of choice, we led a collaboration with Perth County, St. Mary's, and Cycle Stratford to create Z-Card foldable pocket maps, which showcase our city, rural, gravel, and mountain bike assets throughout the region. The maps are available free of charge from the Destination Stratford office, as well as at various tourism-related businesses throughout the town and across the county. Next slide, please. So I'd like to tip my hat and thank Cycle Stratford for supplying us with many of the cycle routes and working tirelessly throughout the summer, capturing each of these and creating updated digital interactive maps, which can be used from a smartphone and even downloaded to a GPS device. We've recently sent a copy of the paper cycle routes map to council, so hopefully you've received that already. And we invite you to check out visitstratford.ca/cycle to see the digital versions. Next slide, please. So membership in Ontario by Bike and new cycle routes map is a great start, but there's a lot of work to be done. Cycle infrastructure often requires significant investments across strategic partnerships, and these types of projects take both time and resource. The initial work that's been done in 2021 in terms of cycle tourism paves the way for us to continue building momentum. We're working closely with Perth County, who is pursuing a cycle tourism strategic plan for the region. We're also actively pursuing federal and provincial tourism recovery grants for cycle infrastructure projects that would involve both Stratford and the county and St. Mary's. We're also winning over local support for cycle tourism with Stratford businesses registering to become bike-friendly certified, including some key accommodators and hotels. So Destination Stratford is committed to growing cycle tourism in order to diversify and strengthen our tourism offering while also investing in our community's infrastructure. And at this point, I'd like to pass the presentation over to Rebecca Scott from Stratford City Centre BIA to talk a bit more about the opportunity within our downtown core.
Hello, greetings. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you. Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Well, greetings, Councillor Burbach, Ingram, Vasilakis, Gaffney, and Seven. Thank you for entertaining a little bit of this information from us today. So as we look at this Ontario by Bike slide, I just wanted to touch on that. The Downtown Stratford BIA has applied for its cycle-friendly designation through Ontario by Bike. As Zach indicated, we've had several businesses register to be designated as bike-friendly. The criteria to apply includes a registration of a cross-section of businesses, including accommodations, tourism operators, hospitality, and also includes a welcome center, which in our case is Destination Stratford on Downey Street. These businesses are committed to offering patrons and cyclists information about where to get further cycle information for both Stratford and region, providing maps and indicating where bike parking is within proximity. These businesses also have a knowledge of other Ontario by Bike certified businesses that offer healthy food choices and, of course, where everyone can find a washroom. The benefits to being Ontario by Bike certified are vast. Firstly, it helps us as an organization and city improve our understanding of cycle tourism, cycle tourists, including marketing demographics, as well as access to regional and local cycling information. We can tap into the Ontario by Bike marketing support. Decals will be provided to the businesses who have registered to indicate they are bike friendly. Businesses are also offered webinars and education on adapting their service and product offerings to their business to better service cyclists and to improve the cycling experience in our region. Ontario by Bike newsletter is sent out to their database, which is, in the upwards of 15,000 cyclists multiple times a year. And we're included in their search database of businesses and in the region that are bike friendly, as well as providing maps to the visitor. We get to grow a regional profile, and we also support economic growth for our business community, because as we know, when people come in, they like to eat and shop and spend time. So the next slide. Oh, actually, just stay there for a moment. I'll finish here. In the past, the BIA has provided support of cycle initiatives and active transportation by hosting Car-Free Fridays, including bike shops for tune-ups and offering a warm beverage in Market Square for those who ditched their cars and rode their bikes to work. We have promoted cycle tourism and cycle stakeholder activity in our marketing and social media. We have supported and sponsored events such as Perth County Cycle Tour through Cycle Stratford, and highlighting businesses that offer cycle initiatives such as money off of services if you show up on your bike. Next slide, please. So the Downtown Stratford BIA recently did an audit of the existing bike racks in our catchment. So this is the downtown core. We identified the condition and noted the placement and use. And this map also includes a photo of each rack. We also surveyed our members to identify where bike parking was needed, and we are currently pricing out additional racks to fill in any gaps. Next slide, please. So recently, the BIA worked collectively with the city and our friends at Cycle Tourism to determine where 5 bike rings in the city's inventory would be placed. We identified that Market Square is a cycle hotspot with welcoming al fresco tables, public restrooms, and our Ontario by Bike Welcome Center at Destination Stratford. And while our beautification budget is slim for the BIA and supply, as Zach mentioned, supply and cost is up, we are researching the pricing of bike repair stations and bike parking solutions. The locations for consideration for repair stations would be the Market Square perimeter and the Boathouse area. This would give cyclists repair access 24 hours a day. Within our stakeholder group, we will continue to look at funding opportunities to build the infrastructure required to support this growing tourism sector. We would like to keep our radar open to these placemaking grants that either our stakeholders or the city are eligible for. Perhaps there's an opportunity for co-application or for cost sharing between our stakeholder group and the city on infrastructure initiatives. So we wanted to take the opportunity today to let you know we are motivated and excited to work toward a bike-friendly city and region that supports a healthy community, economic growth, and a positive impact on our environment. We thank you for your time, and we look forward to the road ahead, and I might say, whether it be bumpy or smooth. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thanks for your presentation. Does anyone have any questions for our presenters today? Well, we really appreciate the information, and the couple of things that I might note. Tonight we're having a Active Transportation Advisory Committee, ATAC meeting, and we will be talking about bike parking at that point, and we will also be getting a presentation from staff about the current state of bike parking. So Rebecca, you're welcome to come along to the ATAC meeting if you'd like, because it probably would be a great idea to sort of integrate our ideas, and you'll get an idea of maybe what the plan is moving forward, and we can make sure we don't overlap our efforts.
Wonderful.
All right, well, thanks very much for your presentation. And if there's no other questions or comments, we will move on to the next item. Okay, so 3.3 is a delegation by Ron Dodson. I'd just like to note that it is Ron and not Rod, so apologies for the spelling error in the agenda. So Ron is a representative of Cycle Stratford, and he'd like to address subcommittees to present findings of their cycling road surface audit. So Mr. Dodson, if you want to go ahead, that would be great.
Through the chair, while we're waiting to get Mr. Dodson connected, could we just have a motion to hear?
Oh, sorry. Yes.
Thank you.
Councillor Ingram's moving that we would hear Mr. Dodson. All those in favor? Okay, carried. Thank you.
And apparently I'm unmuted now. Is that correct?
Yes, you are. We can hear you. Please go ahead.
Great. Thanks very much. Thanks for the opportunity to speak to the committee today on behalf of Cycle Stratford. It would be a great day to be out on my bike, but here we are. It's good to see the theme of cycling in today's meeting. This presentation will involve all three of this committee's mandates: infrastructure, transportation, and safety. Before beginning, I'd like to acknowledge the assistance of Mike Bites and Nathan Bottema of the city staff with the logistics of this informal study. Both helped with great enthusiasm. The idea of cycling road audit was a reaction to hearing and reading years of comments, mostly complaints, about the condition of Stratford streets, and mostly coming from the protected, rubber-cushioned perspective of the inside of a car. I kept thinking about how cyclists experience streets differently, and how a single pavement crack or a single catch basin or pothole could change a cyclist's life in the blink of an eye. Cycle Stratford's board endorsed the idea of a road audit, quote unquote, which would see the road from the unprotected, highly vulnerable saddle of a cyclist. How does perception change when only the curbside 1.5 meters are examined? How does a pothole or a longitudinal crack or alligator pavement affect the travel line of the cyclist in Stratford? Are the catch basins and areas surrounding them safe? Is there a significant difference between the curb and pavement height? Where does road width and the traffic volume affect cyclist safety? The audit is clearly unscientific, as it was done by community members who are amateurs and hope that their enthusiasm mitigates their lack of detail and rigor. Our work is intended as a small assistance to politicians and staff as road budgets are struck. The results are in the report in your package. I'm not going to go through each slide, but I will highlight several items. Our objectives are outlined on slides 2 and 3. We viewed the entire project through the lens of cyclist safety, not comfort, but safety. The safety of the least confident, the least comfortable, and the least experienced. This point of view aligns with the work of Gil Penalosa, whom the Energy and Environment Committee brought to Stratford in the fall of 2009 to talk about 8 to 80 cities. On slides 4 and 5, you can see how we approached the project in 4 phases. The first step was an online workshop with 12 volunteers from the Cycle Stratford board and members of the group as well. In it, we developed criteria for a green, yellow, red traffic light reporting system. Green denoted safe, relatively smooth sections of road. Yellow sections were generally described as minimally to moderately unsafe areas, and red sections were dangerous and highly unsafe areas, or as I called them, bloody unsafe. Slides 6 and 7 give the detailed criteria, which we then applied to 6 sample areas of road. The samples on slide 8 stimulated a lot of discussion. You can get an idea of what color the group classified each section by the color of the frame around each. And I might just pause there for a moment if you can go back, please, thank you, to mention that on the one on the far left is designated as a red area. And that came about because the angle of the picture that was taken of it made it appear much more red than it probably actually is. So I'll come back to that one a little bit later on in the presentation. Slides 9 through 12 outline the other 3 steps of the road audit. 6 teams of 2 were assigned the task of riding or walking every street, road, crescent, place, terrace, lane, and avenue in Stratford in both directions, and mapping the areas that they found were yellow or red. Each team's results were spot checked and verified by a separate team. The results were then transferred to the master citywide map, which we submitted in hard copy and e-version to the engineering department. Slide 13 starts our team's observations. The good news is that Stratford's roads are in generally good condition for cyclists. There are many kilometers of pavement that can be used safely by cyclists of all ages, comfort levels, and abilities. However, there are also significant stretches of yellow curbside pavement which need attention. There are also major sections of red road that are extremely dangerous and need immediate improvement, in our opinion. We feel that the 4 worst are Downey Street in both directions south of Market Square and especially south of the railroad tracks, the Waterloo Street Hill in both directions, an extended stretch of Britannia Street in both directions, and most of Delamere Street, where there are long stretches of yellow pavement, but we looked at it as bad because the street seems to be narrow and it has lots of traffic. These streets have major deficiencies and are accidents waiting to happen, in our opinion. Rebuilding them, not patching them, is our first recommendation when we get to slide 17. I'll highlight only a couple more observations and recommendations. Again, cyclists depend on road surfaces for safety first and for comfort second. Patching road surfaces, including the curbside 1.5 meters, has unequal consequences for drivers and for cyclists. A pothole patch may be felt to a driver as a shiver or a bump or not at all. But for a cyclist, it can mean a sudden decision to lurch right toward the curb, or worse, left toward traffic, or even worse, they might go over their handlebars. We point this out in observation 3 on slide 13 and recommendations 1 and 2 on slide 17. Slide 15 outlines our observations about catch basins, which continue to be safety issues for cyclists. Too many catch basins have deteriorated areas around them, crumbling and cracked pavement and potholes and grates that are parallel to the traffic direction. Chevron pattern grates in catch basins and a solid surface around them are far safer for cyclists. We encourage the city to expand your program of replacing the remaining parallel catch basins and rebuilding, not patching, the area around them with cement. On slide 16, we observed that the Ping Street app is marginally useful for most cyclists, except in the most extreme circumstances. Some cynical cyclists, and I freely admit to being among them on occasion, feel that the Ping Street app helps the city to appear to be proactive and responsive. But that perception is not supported with the perception that it is not supported with prompt action and published measurable service standards. This may not be true in reality, but it is cyclist perception. Other cyclists have said that the app is awkward, time-wasting, and sometimes can be dangerous. The pictures that are optional but recommended in the app can also be potentially misleading, as entirely different stories can be told depending on the lighting conditions and the angle and scope of the photo, as per the reference that I made earlier. We recommend that its usefulness to cyclists be reconsidered. The citywide map of results on slide 19 and the detailed maps of each of the 6 sections of the city, plus some sample text notes, are on slides 20 to 23, and we don't need to worry about the detailed ones right now. As you can see by the sections of yellow and red, the safest green sections were not mapped, by the way. Most of the curbside 1.5 meters is in pretty good condition overall. Where the surface is good, it's safe. But where it's not good, it can be bloody dangerous. Thanks for your time and attention. On behalf of Cycle Stratford, I hope this has been useful to you and to the relevant departments as budgets and priorities are established for next year and for beyond. I would be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Dotson. Are there any questions from the committee for Mr. Dotson? Councillor Gaffney.
It's really not questions at this point, but I've got to say this because this is who I am, and all you know this, that we don't have a Delamere Street. We have a Delamere Avenue, and Britannia is only spelled one way. My apologies, but I can't help myself sometimes.
Thank you for that correction.
Councillor Ingram.
Thank you. So my question isn't so much for Mr. Dodson, but rather for Mr. Crinklaw. I'm wondering if we have an approximate cost on the repairing, the full repair of the road network around a catch basin without doing full road reconstruction versus patching.
Yeah, through the chair, sorry, I don't have that number available at this time, but I can bring it back to the next meeting.
Thank you.
Councillor Gaffney.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And again, this isn't a question for the presenter, but through you to the director, do we not have an active transportation fund that we sort of put towards bike lanes and stuff? I think, I'm not sure on how it works, but would some of that funding be available to do some of the more urgent things, or what?
Yes, through the chair. In the report provided here, they do identify multiple areas of concern, and they're all addressed differently. Some of them are left to our Public Works division, who does pothole repairs or larger patchwork or even small sections of resurfacing when necessary. That would be included within their budget. In terms of capital, we do have funds for accessibility, and we do have sidewalk repair, and we do have what used to be the bike and trails replacement. I think this past year we've called it something else entirely, but that roughly, I think it's $200,000 is allocated for some of those larger capital works, but the smaller stuff is generally addressed through Public Works. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I would just like to make a few comments. As a cyclist, I have observed a lot of these challenging spots, and I'm wondering if we could maybe make a recommendation to concentrate on some of the streets that are next to schools. And I did notice that on Mowat and on Rebecca, both of those were flagged as red. I do travel on Mowat regularly, and there's some very large potholes. So I'm wondering if there's a way that we could, and I'm not sure, the Director of Infrastructure obviously has received this information, but if we could maybe put some focus on areas where we would like students to be riding their bikes to school, and maybe put a concentration on those areas to repair first. Is that possible, Mr. Crinklaw?
Yes, to the chair. I can provide that information to the Public Works, so when they do dispatch their staff to do repairs, to take that into consideration. But they do have staff that go out daily to inspect roadways to make sure they're in compliance with our minimum maintenance standards. So we are effectively doing that every day, but I can inform the manager of Public Works of that.
Thank you. Councillor Gaffney.
So should we put that in the form of a motion because we're giving staff direction on looking into our road replacement or road work policy or something? I'm not sure. I look to maybe the clerk on that. So sorry.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure the answer to that either. So maybe we can ask Ms. Defoe if she has any advice for us.
So through the chair, we always recommend passing a motion when directing staff to undertake additional work. But I would look to the director to see if that is his preferred course of action, or if he would prefer just to take that back to staff.
The chair, in terms of just doing the general repair, I can just get that back to staff.
Okay, thank you. A couple of more notes. There is a bike path along Erie Street, which the condition is also quite poor. I would say it's a yellow or a red. Just as a note, if we are thinking of repaving, I think it's an older path, so it's pretty rough. Just for you to note. And the other challenge that I have is that our bike lanes, especially along McCarthy, are really not in good shape. They're full of gravel and dirt, and there are actually some large rocks that have been there for several weeks. So I know there is construction in the area, but there's pieces of metal and rocks, and it is, as a cyclist, as Mr. Dodson notes, it's hard to stop and take a picture of all the things with your cell phone on Ping Street. So I've done a little bit, but if the director could make a note, that it would be great. I don't know if the construction developers along there are required to clean those up, but they are hazardous.
Yeah, just to the chair, just to clarify two of the items there. The Erie Street concern, I would recommend making a resolution for that, because that would be a larger capital works for consideration. In terms of McCarthy, we've had the street sweepers out 7 times this year already. So, but once again, I'll make a note that they do see larger debris to make sure they go and pick that up.
Great, thank you. Councillor Ingram.
Thank you. Also for Mr. Krinkla, on that topic of McCarthy, I believe Councillor Vasilakos a number of years ago had brought forward the idea of having a segregated bike lane along McCarthy. And I'm wondering if that is still under consideration or something that staff are looking into. I don't recall any resolution on that matter.
To the chair, I'm not entirely certain what was said in the past. I'd have to look into that further.
Okay, thanks. I can leave that with you.
Councillor Vasilakos, you had a comment on that?
Yeah, and since we've moved on from the presentation, I think I can weigh in here because we've moved on now to that was actually to do a multi-use trail to do the connector between Mornington and Romeo, and that was actually approved by council, but it was the project that sort of got bumped because we had the issue over at Huntington, and we needed to actually spend the trails money that year to do the crosswalk. And so I think all that's happened is that approved project plus the one on Duro is just sitting on the unfunded but approved list. It wasn't for a separated bike lane along the, but then I think Councillor Ingram, you had talked about doing separated bike lanes on the remainder of McCarthy once it goes through as well. So I think those were considerations for future stuff.
Okay, thank you. Is there anything further on this issue? Seeing none. Oh, Councillor Gaffney.
Sorry, sometimes I start talking. So in consideration of what the director mentioned, would the chair like a motion to have a look at the Erie Street multi-use trail then I will make that motion. One thing I want us to consider is somebody, I don't know if anybody else will be old enough to remember this, but somebody died building that trail. And that trail was a project put on by, I don't remember if it was one of the factories or if it was the union that was, or one of the unions was behind that. Bonnie may have a better recollection of that one, but I just want to keep in mind that if we're gonna dig it up and change it, then that it wasn't the city that did it. It was a outside organization at the time. So
Okay, thank you for that background. And I'm guessing that it could just be resurfaced, but I don't really know because I'm not an engineer. So
I expect so, but I wanted to interject a little bit of local heritage.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
The story for everybody. Thank you.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor. Councillor Sebin.
Thank you. Sorry, can I just clarify what the motion is, please?
Councillor Gaffney, would you like to restate that?
Yes, sorry, just have staff look at the condition and maybe offer some ideas on how to repair or update it or whatever's needed from their reporting.
Thank you.
Are there any other comments or questions? Councillor Vasilakos.
And I would say that that's probably a good one to look at because now the soccer association has done a really nice path that connects that Erie Street over all the way across over to Packham Road. So it does actually do a nice little connected loop so that that piece on Erie that is quite deteriorated, an update to that would be, as I said, a nice little connected loop all the way around.
Yes, I agree. It's quite an important piece of the connection around the city. So, okay, with that, I will call the question. All in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. Item number 4 is the report of the project manager, and 4.1 is Huron Street Reconstruction Phase 1 Public Engagement and Recommendation. So perhaps Mr. Crinklaw or whoever is going to speak to it.
Yep, I can speak to it.
Oh, thank you.
So through the chair, I'm here to present the feedback received from the Huron Street Reconstruction Public Information Center and to obtain approval to initiate the tendering process. It has been proposed that Huron Street be reconstructed from John Street to the Huron Street Bridge. The subsurface infrastructure proposed for replacement dates back to the early 1900s and is undersized and in poor condition. On the surface, the road pavement quality, manholes, catch basins, curb and gutter are all considered to be in poor condition. In May of 2020, the city received funding for this project through the Connecting Links program and retained IBI Group shortly thereafter to provide consultant services. An online public information center was held from October 4th to 15th to allow residents and interested members of the public an opportunity to review and comment on the planned improvements. A narrated presentation and the design drawings were uploaded to the city's website, and residents were asked to complete a questionnaire or to contact staff directly for clarification or to provide comments. The design objective presented through the open house includes upgrading the storm sewer, sanitary sewer, water main, as well as providing new service connections to property line, upgrading the asphalt roadway, curb and gutter, and sidewalk, reconfiguring the 4-lane cross section to a 3-lane cross section that consists of a 3.5 meter wide through lane and a shared center lane, commonly known as a road diet, upgrading the street light illumination at intersections, and upgrading the traffic light infrastructure at the signalized intersections. The common comments received in the open house were about how the traffic flow would be impacted by the 3-lane configuration. And the response to that was that studies have shown that road diets calm traffic, which results in more consistent traffic flow and less stop and go operations. The traffic impact study that was completed for this project also showed that motorists can expect comparable delays between the existing conditions and a 3-lane configuration. So this project is planned to be tendered in November of 2021, with construction planned from April to October in 2022. During construction, traffic will be reduced to 1 lane in each direction and shifted as required to accommodate the construction. That's all I have. Thank you for the time.
Thank you, Mr. Rotsma. Does anyone have any questions or comments? Councillor Seven.
Thank you. Could you just clarify how much of the project is anticipated to be covered up through funding and grants?
Yeah, so through the chair, we received $3 million through the connecting links, and we were expected to have to provide an additional $1 million to cover the entire works of the scope.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Councillor Gaffney.
Yes, I'm going to reiterate what I said last year, is that I don't think the diet's the right solution to the thing. I think all the right-hand turn traffic off that road is going to slow traffic to, or people are going to start using the center lane as a passing lane. I think in 2 years we're going to realize the mistake we've made, and again, that's just my opinion. Somebody that's driven on the streets of Stratford for 40 plus years, you start learning a few things. But so I just wanted to have that on the record. Thanks.
Any other comments or questions? Councillor Vasilakos.
I will move the staff recommendation because I think road diets work really well, especially the left turn lanes. Increases safety a lot for sight lines and traffic for pedestrians, and I actually think they work quite well.
I did have another question, a road diet question for Mr. Botsma. When we're creating this 3-lane effect, are the lanes wider than the ones that are currently there, the 4 lanes that are currently there? And that, can you comment on how that might increase safety?
Yep, through the chair. So currently the 4-lane configuration, the lanes range from 2.95 meters to 3.25 wide. With the new road diet, all of the lanes will be 3.5 meters wide. So that will create a safer environment for the motorists and a more relaxed state, I guess, having that additional width.
Okay, thank you very much. Does anyone else have any comments or questions? If not, I'll call the question. All in favor? Those opposed? And that's carried. Thank you. Item 5 is a report of Manager of Recreation and Marketing. And it's 5.1 is a request for exemption from noise control bylaw for the 2021 Lights on Stratford event. And it's my understanding that Mr. Herndon's not available to answer any questions. Does anyone have any comments or thoughts? I will note that in the report, there was a notice sent out to all the neighboring properties, and there were no concerns that came forward. So, Councillor Seven.
Yes, thank you. I did have a comment and a question. Mr. Herndon can get back to it later when it's available. I just was wondering, because of the time frame, it's over a month of a time period. I was just wondering the possibilities to mitigate if there were a complaint or a concern from a resident that's living in the area, a couple weeks in or something like that. I was just wondering what sort of things we could do to mitigate or act at that time if somebody either thought it wouldn't be a problem or didn't have the opportunity to comment. So that was just my question, but I can receive the feedback at the next meeting.
Okay, thank you. I don't know if maybe the clerk could answer. I'm not sure. Ms. Defoe, do you have an idea if somebody had a problem down the line, what would be the procedure? Well, maybe Ms. Defoe's not there. Oh, hi. Go ahead.
Sorry,
Chris.
through the chair, could you repeat the question?
Do you want to do that again, Cody, or do you want me to rephrase it for you?
No, that's fine. I'm just wondering if we approve the noise exemption, if somebody has concerns with it, a resident, say 2 weeks into it, for example, what sort of things we could do to mitigate at that point, or to help with their concerns if the approval has been given for a 6-week period.
So through the chair, I'm not certain what the process would be for that, but we can certainly take that question back and have the manager of recreation and marketing speak to that at committee.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Defoe.
So further to the deputy clerk, we can certainly take that back. From my understanding, with previous requests that are approved, when there are issues that arise, staff will work with the person with, work with the organizer as well as the complainant. And then they can also always reach out to Stratford Police Services, who enforces the bylaw as well. But we will take this back to the manager of recreation marketing and provide a fulsome response.
Great, thank you very much.
Sorry.
Follow up?
Yeah, thank you. That's great. I just wanted to make sure there was some type of, I assumed there was, but I just wanted to make sure. So thank you.
Councillor Gaffney.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess a question I have, and I'm not expecting an answer right this second. So if it ends up in front of us committee, this is just taking place on the al fresco part of Market Square. This doesn't go out onto the street at all, does it? So, like I say, if that doesn't get answered till the night of committee, then that's fine. But
Ms. Defoe?
Through the chair, it's my understanding it is solely in Market Square.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So do I have a motion? Okay, Councillor Ingram. Any other comments or questions? Okay, I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay, and that's carried. Item 6 is the capital project update. So maybe call on Mr. Crinklaw to give us some of the highlights.
Sure thing. To the chair. So in terms of the highlights, the Queen Street trunk storm sewer project, the drilling actually starts tentatively on Monday, so that's good to hear. A report is coming to council shortly on a recommendation to award the transportation master plan. TJ Dolan multi-use trail paving is scheduled for early as next week. The engineering department is fairly busy with ongoing subdivision applications. The water division has currently shut down the Romeo Control Center, which is the supply for about 60% of the city's water on a normal given day, to do some minor repairs, some cleaning, and some technological upgrades there. That's expected to last about 3 weeks. In terms of public works, over 50% of the fleet is now ready for a winter event if it were to come. So we're well on our way. And I guess the last thing I'll mention is, as of this week, the Public Works Department will have swept the entire city 7 times for this given year. And that's it for me. Any questions?
Hey, Councillor Gaffney.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Are we getting any satisfaction on Redford Crescent, Taylor? Like, is the lawn situation being looked into?
Yes, to the chair. Many of the outstanding deficiencies have now been addressed, but there are still some of the deficiencies that are still ongoing. Paving, we're trying to get paving in as soon as possible, but weather dependent. And there will definitely be some deficiencies that will need to be addressed likely next year as well. But I think for the most part, most have been addressed, and it's a ongoing discussion and matter we're dealing with our contractor at this time.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions? Councillor Vasilakos.
And my apologies, I just tried to load the Recycle Coach app so I can see about some other years, as we've had the leaves drop later and later, we've had to add yard waste pickup. And it does run a little, like, I'm wondering whether, did we have to add any yard waste pickups this year because of the lateness of the frost and leaves falling? Again, my apologies, I did try to look and see what we had, but it seems to be an important thing for people if they feel like the leaves haven't dropped and the pickups aren't coming.
Yeah, through the chair, we'd probably make the decision in a few weeks' time because sometimes it's not until late November before the leaves do drop. So something I'll bring back to staff to look into.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Councillor Gaffney.
I guess that Kathy is reminded me of something about, and I think this might be an environmental thing, is encouraging people to use their leaves as the natural mulch for their lawns and stuff, and stop filling the landfill with the leaves, because it's been several years since I've scratched up the leaves, and the Mother Nature takes care of them well every winter and spring. So I don't know if that's something we can start having a discussion on, or maybe not especially today, but so I
Thank
put
you.
that out there. Thanks.
Yeah, I think that's an important point. It is better for the environment to leave the leaves and to let them mulch naturally. Councillor Vasilakos.
I was going to say maybe Councillor Burbach, you could take that to E&E. They often do little education promotional things around this. And
Yes,
I know the field naturalists have been doing it on social media, but that might be a really nice little campaign for them to do.
Okay, I've made a note. Thank you. Okay, any other questions? Okay, we have item 7. There are advisory committee and outside board minutes for the information of subcommittee. Item 8 is the next subcommittee meeting, which will be on November 24th at 3:30. And item 9 is adjournment. Councillor Sebbin's moving, and all in favor? And that's unanimous. Okay, that's great. Thanks, everyone.
Stay safe, everyone.